Hey, I am Callie from CRK Training. I think we're on live now. And I wanted to do this broadcast for you because right now we're in the middle of the intro to my balanced riding course. So this is a course that I do 2 times a year. It runs for 8 weeks. It's pretty big. We put a lot of energy and focus into it. And we always open up the intro videos to the course for free so that everyone can participate in those. And then if you feel it's a good fit, you can go further. So I've been getting a lot of questions in from these intro videos, and I wanted to take a few minutes and just answer some of these questions a little bit more in depth. And also, since we're on live, if you have any questions that you want to type into the comments, I will be happy to answer as many of them as I can. So this is going to be short, just 10, maybe 15 minutes, and I hope you get some value out of this. So I am going to scroll down here and just find first video to jump in. While I'm doing this, if you're on live, just type a comment in and let me know if you're hearing me, if you're seeing me okay, just so we know that everything's working before we get too far in. Okay, so the first question that I want to answer was from April. And April asked, I'm able to do the sit and standing trot. Oh, the sit and stand trot, but I can't seem to do it sitting. So April, I'm assuming that you mean you're able to post the trot, but you haven't been able to learn the sitting trot. So this is not uncommon. A lot of people that are taught to post first have difficulty learning to sit. The reason is they often learn in posting trot to hold too much tension and rigidity in their body. And the sitting trot requires a lot of, I'll call it like loose movement in the hip joint. So the rider's hip joints have to be really loose so that if you picture it, basically the rider's pelvis kind of stays in the saddle and follows the movement of the trot, and the rider's body is supported just enough so that you're not absorbing the movement in your back and in your spine. So what you don't want the sitting trot to feel like is this, where your back is absorbing the movement. Instead, you want to feel like you engage your postural muscles so that you are not like tight in your core, but that you're supporting your position, and that you allow the bump of the horse's trot. So as the horse is trotting, their back is essentially going up and down, and you allow that bump of the back coming up, that bump against your sit bones in the saddle, to just kind of lift you up. So that really, it's kind of hard in a chair, but really you want the sitting trot to look more like this. So you can see my head's going up and down, my hips going up and down, and this joint has to stay really loose. Some horses are easier to ride a sitting trot in than others. Also, if your horse goes hollow in the trot, meaning that he lifts his head and he drops his back, for any horse, that's going to make the gait of the trot more bumpy, more irregular, and it's going to be more difficult to sit. So that's kind of a little bit the overall mechanics. Now, one of the best exercises for actually feeling the sitting trot is to start riding it without your stirrups, but only do a few steps at a time. So you're going to either have someone lead your horse, or you're going to cue your horse to go into trot. Just trot for literally like 2 or 3 steps and then come back to walk. Do that a number of times until you can start to build out having longer periods where you're able to trot and you're able to stay fluid with the horse as you're trotting. So sitting trot is okay to feel bouncy, but you don't want to feel like you're absorbing it in your back doing this, and you also don't want to feel like you're hitting the horse's back, but more that you're going with the bounce. Do we have any just comments or questions in yet?
We have one question, but I'm waiting for some clarification.
Okay, sounds good. I will take another one of the questions here. So if you haven't joined us yet in this kind of little online riding clinic or this intro series, if you just go to balancedridingcourse.com, you can enter your name and email there, and there's 4 videos that are up for free, and answering questions and everything in the comments too. Okay, so we kind of talked about sitting trot. And next, really good one to talk about is Michelle's question. I would like to learn how to feel more balanced in the canter. I'm concerned about falling off or the horse tripping when I canter in the arena. So this is kind of a tough question to answer, just in the sense of when I can see a rider, I can usually kind of determine pretty easily where that rider might be holding tension or where they are positioning themselves in a way that they're blocking their ability to move with the horse. So the benefit of being able to see someone ride is that I can see those things, and I can tell you specifically, for your riding, where you are blocked or where you're holding too much tension. So once we kind of identify it, then it's choosing an exercise, because there's a whole number of different exercises you can do, choosing an exercise to help you find the right position, or to help you get rid of the brace wherever you're tightening. So either brace or, having a positional thing, like say your legs really far forward, is going to block the movement of the canter. So just like we did with our little sitting trot discussion for the canter, what you want to feel, kind of the ideal, is that the canter has a rolling motion. So if the trot is like this, the canter has more of a rolling, kind of a rocking horse movement, if you will. So that means that your hip joints also have to be very soft, and the movement is more of kind of a slight opening and closing of your angle here from body to thigh, so that your upper body stays generally pretty upright, your pelvis sits square in the saddle, and your pelvis essentially rolls with the movement of the canter, with your body staying upright, which creates that movement. Again, just like with the trot, some horses are going to have an easier canter to learn on, some are going to be more difficult. The smaller the horse's movement in the canter, the easier it is to get the feel of it. The bigger the movement, the more you have to kind of let go, so to speak, in your body in order to roll with that movement. So the kind of general exercise that I would recommend for improving in the canter is, just like I said, for sitting trot, doing transitions. If you can start to get those first few strides, then a lot of times riders will ride the first few strides pretty well, and then they'll find themselves starting to brace. And if you can work on increasing that length of time from picking up the canter to increasing the number of strides, that's where you can get most of your improvement. And then as you start to get better there, you can start to feel yourself tense, but then soften the tension. And then pretty soon it becomes where you catch yourself bracing or moving into an old position really early, and you can just soften and continue to go forward. If you have trouble with the canter transition itself, in the third video that I just posted earlier this morning, it was actually a video that we had all shot and like ready to go out. And then from reading emails and comments, we had a lot of people asking about specifically riding the canter and the canter transition. So we shot an extra little clip and put in there in that third video for you. So again, that's at that balancedridingcourse.com. And in the Balanced Riding course, the full program, we do video coaching too. So it helps kind of bridge that gap between, even if we can't work together personally, with the videos and seeing that, I can still help often see where maybe the problem is and then recommend some specific exercises. Do we get clarification on the question yet?
Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions coming in.
Awesome.
I'll share the first one from Amy. She said, when I jump over a jump, I always stay folded over longer than I need to, which then means I can't steer the horse or properly get ready for the next jump. Any way to help me?
Yes. What I would do, and this is, I always like to give credit because I think he's just a genius in teaching this. So this is where I've learned pretty much all of my recent jumping techniques and teaching exercises is from Angelo Pelletin. And one of the exercises that he does that I find phenomenal for keeping the upper body up is jump with one hand behind your back. So you ideally want to start this with a grid. If you set a series of like 4 trot poles to a small cross rail, so you start with setting out like 6 trot rails, trot through them, and then put the last 2 together at the end, and then put that into a cross rail, and then build that up. You know, if you're jumping 3 foot or 3.5 foot, and you have a horse with the athleticism to trot to that and jump, you can put that as high as your skill level dictates, or you can keep it a little tiny cross rail if you're just starting. But what you do is when you come into the exercise, as soon as you enter the poles, you take the reins in one hand, you put the other arm like this behind your back, and what that does is it takes away your ability to lean on the neck and like lean on your crest release for balance. So it essentially kind of forces your body to find more stability and balance through your thigh and also in your seat. So you'll find that when you jump, you end up staying closer to the saddle and keeping your center of gravity more over the horse instead of going forward. So a lot of times if you find yourself saying folded too long, you're probably coming too far forward, and then you have to throw yourself back versus just being in balance with the horse over the jump. So try one hand behind your back and switch your hands. And then there's other things you can do. You can put a hand on your hip. You can even put a hand on your helmet. But all of those will essentially kind of trigger your body to find that more balanced position. Great question.
Okay, so we had 2 of sort of the same question. So our issue with language was Obrus is from Belgium. So
okay.
We weren't sure for the English term for it. So he basically asked about how you can get your horse's neck to not be so bound and get him relaxed. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's a good one. Sophia. Mm-hmm. She also asked about how you can get your horse round without putting your arms down and getting stiff in your arms.
Okay.
So sort of along the same lines.
Yeah, those are great questions too. So I will kind of preface that a little bit with just explaining what we're talking about if anybody's watching that maybe is not quite as familiar with the horse's body carriage. So what happens if we're trying to get the horse into a better frame, but we take rein contact and we release the contact when the horse brings his head like up and back, is we teach the horse to come what is sometimes called behind the bit, or what is called like curling the neck, or coming too far back, or shortening the neck, all kind of terms for generally the same movement. What we're doing accidentally, if we take contact and we release on the horse coming back, is we're rewarding that behavior. It's the basic principle of pressure and release. Now, the reason that we don't want a shortened neck is because when the horse pulls his neck back and, like brings his nose in, we end up having more tension through the back, and we just don't have as good of movement for the horse. So it's a less comfortable ride for the rider. It causes more problems physically for the horse. So what we want the horse to do when they're moving is to actually be reaching out and essentially like extending with their neck. And as they extend through their neck, it helps to lift the back, and that allows for more free movement and better movement of the hind leg and so on. So if you're already having the problem with the horse coming too far back with his neck, essentially what you have to do is trigger him going forward with the neck and then find a way to reinforce that, which means rewarding it and or releasing pressure. So one of the first things is to make sure that you have forward movement. So it's very difficult to get that forward reaching of the neck if you don't have good rhythm forward. So with a horse that's coming really far behind, one of the first things that I would do is see if I can get them to go on a loose rein and make sure that they move well off of my leg cue for go forward, so that I can get a big rhythmic stride. Now the next step is to take contact and teach them that when you feel the rein, you actually want them to stretch forward instead of come back. if your horse has already learned that contact means duck my nose down and shorten my neck, you're going to have to learn to slide back a little with your elbow and be like really free with your elbow, so that as you're riding, you can keep the contact when he's sucking his head back. And then as soon as you get a little stretch forward, you soften down. So how you get that little stretch forward is often by getting bending, such as riding a circle, or asking the horse to step under with one hind leg. Because when you get that movement, if you have the rhythm, remember that's kind of our base, forward movement and rhythm, and then you start to add some bending and moving the hind leg, it's going to trigger a little more of a stretch for the neck, and then you want to release rein pressure on that. You want to make sure that you're not releasing your contact when the horse is sucking his neck back. If he makes that mistake, you just stay free through your elbow so that you can slide back with your elbow and keep the contact in those moments. So really good question. I'm trying to think if we have any videos out there that show this. I don't think we have any videos on this specifically on the blog. We talk about it in the course some, but if you needed help with the basics of like going forward, there are several good videos that are, you know, on the blog or on YouTube for free about getting forward movement. All right, any other questions?
There are a few, but this one I feel like could relate to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Vanja said, I can't keep reins in my hands tightly, so they get longer and longer, and I lose contact in steering. I focus on shortening them almost all the time. Do you have any exercises?
Read it to me one more time.
So I can't keep reins in my hands tightly,
Okay.
so they get longer and longer. I lose contact in steering. I focus on shortening them almost all of the time.
I think I probably know what is happening. Do we have like a rein or even just like a cord? Even an extension cord will work. So it's easier to show if I have something that I can put in my hand. That works. We should have been more prepared. So I have a feeling what's happening is that you're probably just positioning the rein a little bit at the wrong spot in your hand. So for example, with these reins, otherwise known as a Mac charger, there we go, I got it. A lot of people end up holding the rein like in the forward joints of the finger. And I find that if you hold the rein there, for one, either your rein, it's easier to like lose grip in your hand and the rein will slide more. And then in order to try to keep the grip, you have to like really squeeze your fingers in, and you end up with more tension and bracing through your hand and your wrist and your forearm. But instead, if you lay the rein where your palm meets your fingers, if you lay the rein kind of in that crease, then you can just fold your fingers back and you've got a little bit more just like kind of grip, because you've got the meatier part of your hand basically against the rein. So you don't have to grip as hard, and you also have a little bit more hold just because of where that rein is laying. And then of course, you know, your thumb rests on top. You don't want to be squeezing down tight with your thumb, but it just rests there. So I would try that little positional thing. So without seeing you, obviously I don't know for sure that that's what you're doing, but when people ask me about the rein sliding, I usually find that they're just holding the rein in not the best place, and just moving it will really help the kind of security and the grip that you feel you have on the rein without being tight. Right, I think we have time for, let's do like 2 more questions.
Okay. I have 2 that are sort of related.
Okay.
The first one is, I'm having trouble posting the trot. My legs get very tired. Any tips?
Yes. So I'm going to kind of guess and say that your legs are probably somewhere where you're using them, like using more muscle than you need to. So what can happen, what's most common in posting trot is that riders' legs go too far forward. So they end up trying to put too much weight into the heel when they come up for the posting, and that swings the leg forward. So with the leg swung forward, instead of the weight just kind of coming naturally onto the thigh, a lot of times you feel like you've got to kind of hang on because your balance isn't as good. So again, I'm just kind of guessing here, and you can tell me if this sounds like it's what's happening to you. But if you put too much weight in the heel and your leg swings forward, your upper body has to come forward, and a lot of times you'll end up gripping in order to try to stabilize yourself. Instead, if you bring your lower leg back into that, what's classically taught, that shoulder, hip, heel position, which is classically taught, but often where that position is usually further back than where a lot of people end up having their leg, especially when they're in the posting trot. So when your leg is underneath you like that, what that allows for is when you come up in your posting, the weight gets distributed to your thigh as well as in the stirrup. Instead of, if you're just going into your heel, all the weight's going on the stirrup, and you have to grip and work harder in order to stabilize yourself. When the weight comes onto your thigh, then that weight bearing helps to stabilize, and you end up using less muscle. Also, when you're in this position, it frees up the hip joint, just like we were talking about in sitting trot and in canter. And when you free the hip joint, the momentum for the posting comes more from the horse's movement of their back versus you having to stand up. So we do have a really good video on this that is here on YouTube and on the blog. If you just type in skeleton, it will come up. I don't remember the full name of the video, but it was with Wendy Murdoch, who is an amazing instructor, and she did a program for us here at CRK Training. And we posted one of the videos where she is showing with a skeleton horse and a skeleton rider this movement of the kind of free hip joint and the hip swinging, with the idea that the momentum comes from the horse's movement instead of the rider trying to stand up. So that would be my guess as to what is likely happening for you there. I think Julia is finding the video and probably posting a link. Did we have another question?
Yes.
This our last question.
Let me just. Okay. How do I stay balanced riding stirrupless with a very bouncy horse? That was from Doses of Hope, and she says you're awesome.
Oh, thank you. Okay, how to stay balanced without stirrups on a bouncy horse. So the first thing that I would kind of come back to is what we talked about when we were discussing sitting trot, and that is, if the horse is hollow, it's going to be very difficult to find a good rhythm and to feel comfortable at the sitting trot. And it's kind of a vicious cycle, because if the rider becomes stiff or unbalanced and starts hitting the horse's back, naturally they're going to raise their head and drop their back in order to try to kind of get away from that pressure, which makes the trot even bouncier, which makes the rider start to bounce more, and the horse tries to go even more hollow, and it's kind of that vicious cycle. So what I would start with is, just like I recommended, doing just a few strides at a time and then coming back to walk. So once you're kind of in it, and if your horse is hollow and you're feeling like you're bouncing, it's hard to get it back. It's usually easier to come back to walk, reorganize yourself, get the rhythm and walk, and then go back into trot for those few steps. And what you really want to focus on, especially when you don't have those stirrups, it makes it easier to focus on this, is being really loose here. So just like really feeling when the horse is trotting that your thigh is just kind of like jelly, like it's just bouncing with the horse, you're not gripping at all. Often I'll say there's two things that I notice when someone seems to struggle with a sitting trot. The first is either they try to hang on with their leg, which as soon as you start tightening these big muscles, it starts to limit the movement and the freedom of movement that you have here, which means you're not going to be able to go with the horse. You're going to tend to bounce more, or the rider like kind of feels the first like bounces and starts to come forward in order to try to feel more stable. And again, once you come forward here, you're limiting the movement that you have in this joint, and it becomes a lot harder to go with the horse. So I would go back to just doing those transitions, just into trot for a few steps, back to walk. It's easier on the horse, and it is easier for you as well. And just another random tip that can help with this is riding with one hand. So there's something about when we have a movement pattern that we've already kind of created, if you can sometimes break it in random ways, I find that it becomes easier to like learn a new one. So if you can ride with your reins in one hand and just let the other hand flop, this is another thing that I got from a clinic with Angelo just recently. He used this exercise in a number of different settings for riders, but put the reins in one hand, let the other arm just stay really loose, and do your transitions into trot for a few steps back to walk with just that one hand. And it kind of breaks the pattern of trying to like sometimes tighten up holding both reins. And it's amazing how it can kind of unlock that feeling of the sitting trot. So try those exercises. I hope that's helpful. I think that's all the questions that we have time for today. I've got some more lessons coming in, and I'm going to grab a quick lunch before I get back to the lessons. So I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. I mentioned that little learning tip, and that's actually what we're focusing on in the intro videos to the Balanced Riding course, is focusing on how we as riders can learn the best so that we can learn faster and learn more effectively. We can actually enjoy the process of learning, which I think is really important, because we're riding to have fun. So we might as well enjoy the whole process, even if we're just starting out or coming back into it. And I'd love to have you join me. Again, it's balancedridingcourse.com. If I missed your question, if you didn't have time to get to your question, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for submitting it. And if you want to join in on those on the intro videos, I'll be in the comments there answering questions in the comments, and I can also do more of these Q&As to answer the questions there too. So thank you, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in our little online riding clinic that we're doing here the next few days.